from Cyprus and former First Ladies of Haiti and Jordan. Welcome all. If everyone would take their seats, we greatly appreciate it. We can begin. I'd like to welcome everybody today, all of our distinguished guests, for joining us for this profoundly relevant presentation that you're about to witness. Strengthening solidarity and promoting peace through soft power. I'm Andrea Sankey, I'm the host of the Newsmakers on the World. Now, a few months ago, I think very few of us could have imagined what we have witnessed over the past few weeks. But what is happening around the world right now could not be more indicative of why diplomacy matters. The results of the use of hard power, manifested in interstate relations really for centuries, proves now more than ever that the world needs a more comprehensive and pluralistic approach to diplomacy. It is the use of soft power that our panelists will be addressing today. That is the nonviolent, peaceful methods through which gradual humanitarian, economic, cultural, and social investment can build bonds and understanding that steer nations away from conflict and toward peace. We're going to watch a brief video of just those efforts.
As the world's problems seem to mount, Turkey feels compelled to offer a way out. Where there's a cry for help, it extends a hand, regardless of religion, language, or race. At more than 4 million, Turkey hosts the most refugees in the world. Compared with its national income, it's also the most generous country for humanitarian aid. And among all this, Africa holds a special place. First Lady Erdogan says despite geographical distance, the two hearts are one.
Türkiye için insani yardım sadece acil durumlarda gönderilen yardım kolileri demek değil. Güvenli, huzurlu ve müreffeh bir dünyanın inşası, insanlığın sorunlarını ve acılarını paylaşmakla mümkündür.
Emine Erdogan has been a vocal critic of the humanitarian tragedies that have unfolded worldwide. She has also pioneered international projects to empower women, alongside initiatives both at home and abroad to reverse climate change. And as wars threaten humanity, Emine Erdogan has reached out to the most remote corners of the globe to promote diplomacy and embrace people in need. She believes democracy and human rights should be universal for all. When children got caught up in the conflict in Gaza, she appealed for warplanes to clear the skies to make way for kites. And as another war broke out between Russia and Ukraine, she was the leading first lady in the world to send a message of peace.
Birinci elden bir tecrübeyle biliyoruz ki en kırılgan grubu oluşturan kadın ve çocuklar savaşlardan orantısız şekilde etkileniyorlar. Çocukların isminin ölüm haberlerinde geçtiği bir dünyada hiçbirimiz mutlu ve huzurlu olamayız. Ben de bir kadın, bir anne, hem anneanne hem de babaanne olarak tarifsiz bir üzüntü içindeyim. Burada tüm dünyaya seslenmek istiyorum. Hali hazırda devam eden savaşları durdurmamız gerekirken yeni bir savaşa daha izin vermeyin.
Turkey believes in persuasion instead of aggression and replacing weapons with words to promote peace around the world.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have the distinct honor of introducing our distinguished speakers today. They will be addressing exactly how soft power can be utilized towards strengthening solidarity and peace. First, let me welcome to the podium the Executive President and founder of the Antalya Forum, Mr. Jean-Paul.
Mesdames les Premières Dames, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, Madame Erdogan, j'ai été particulièrement ému de voir ce film, car je tiens à rappeler qu'il y a 11 ans déjà, mon organisation vous a décerné son prestigieux prix de la Fondation, et Madame Irina Bokova, directrice générale de l'UNESCO, était venue pour vous le remettre, pour vous dire tout l'appréciation et tout le respect que nous portons à votre engagement. Hier, le chef de l'État turc a tout dit. Le discours était impressionnant parce que c'était un constat de la situation de notre monde d'aujourd'hui. Et je voudrais simplement ajouter des éléments de réflexion par rapport à notre thématique qui est en fait la recherche d'une nouvelle diplomatie pour établir la paix dans le monde et faire de notre monde un monde meilleur. L'ONU a 75 ans. Le nazisme a disparu il y a 75 ans. Le communisme a disparu il y a 30 ans. Plus personne ne pouvait penser qu'aujourd'hui des enfants seraient massacrés, que des personnes seraient déplacées au cœur même de l'Europe, à 1h30 d'avion de la Turquie. C'est un véritable 11 septembre que l'Europe connaît. D'abord, ce furent les Américains qui furent frappés. Aujourd'hui, c'est l'Europe qui est frappée et la guerre est au cœur même de nos pays. Il y a donc une réinvention absolument nécessaire à laquelle nous devons procéder. Et lorsque le président Erdogan parlait de réinventer un système multilatéral, je naturellement souscris à cela, mais je me disais, quel chantier! Comment pouvons-nous y parvenir? En effet, si nous prenons les Nations Unies, c'est en fait le club des vainqueurs de la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Et avec le jeu du veto, comme le chef de l'État le disait hier, beaucoup d'actions et beaucoup de décisions ne peuvent pas être prises. Les Nations Unies ne sont pas faites pour la gestion des affaires du monde au XXIe siècle. Les Nations Unies sont en fait la réminiscence d'un État de droit de notre monde il y a 75 ans. Et puis, J'ai l'honneur d'être un ambassadeur auprès de l'UNESCO, auprès de la FAO, et je peux vous dire, mesdames et messieurs, que l'affectio societatis, le désir d'être ensemble pour décider collectivement des affaires du monde, n'existe plus. Il y a les grands joueurs, les big players, qui sont aussi les big payers des organisations internationales, qui imposent leur volonté, et il y a une masse de petits pays qui essayent de suivre, et tout cela donne en fait les conséquences que vous avez pu constater ces jours derniers. À côté de cela, comment fonctionne le monde au niveau diplomatique? Les relations internationales sont par terre. Un des défauts d'ailleurs que dans l'académie que j'ai créée avec le président de la Slovénie, que nous relevons, un des premiers problèmes, c'est que les chefs d'État ont un téléphone portable. Alors maintenant, ils s'adressent les uns avec les autres, souvent d'une manière un peu brutale, et en mettant de côté le filtre structurant de la diplomatie. Il n'est pas bon que les grands acteurs du monde puissent s'invectiver en direct alors que nous avons appris à gérer nos relations d'une manière diplomatique intelligente. Beaucoup de ministères des Affaires étrangères, et beaucoup de pays en souffrent, beaucoup de ministères des Affaires étrangères sont devenus des ONG. Elles traitent les affaires du jour. Elles ont oublié qu'il fallait d'abord créer avec une vision des politiques étrangères à long terme. C'est terminé. Et alors, dans ce faisceau, on s'aperçoit que beaucoup d'ambassadeurs sont devenus des militants. Et lorsque ces ambassadeurs viennent chez vous, ils commencent par vous parler de vos propres affaires avant de parler des intérêts qu'ils sont censés et payés pour représenter. C'est un énorme problème parce qu'il n'y a plus de confiance et véritablement de communication entre les États. Il faut bien voir, je parlais il y a peu de temps avec le ministre des Affaires étrangères de la Chine. Il me disait, Monsieur Carteron, nous ne sommes pas une partie du monde, nous sommes un monde. Nous avons nos valeurs, nous existons, et surtout, nous n'avons pas l'intention de déménager. C'est-à-dire que l'on doit accepter ce que nous sommes. On doit accepter que nous sommes là. Et en fonction de cette acceptation, nous traiter à la hauteur de ce que nous représentons. Qui est légitime dans le monde pour dire que ces valeurs sont les vraies valeurs et que les autres doivent s'effacer devant ces valeurs? Il y a un problème d'acceptation de l'autre qui n'existe plus. Et dans tout ce que je relevais dans le discours du président Erdogan hier, je sentais, si vous voulez, cette idée majeure qui revient. Il n'y a plus aujourd'hui d'affectio societatis, de désir d'être ensemble, de parler, de s'associer, de travailler pour un monde meilleur. C'est pour ça que nous souffrons de tout cela. Alors, qui est légitime pour dire ce que doit être le monde? Qui est légitime pour afficher véritablement un comportement qui soit structurant, qui soit constructif pour notre planète? Ce qui se passe actuellement est un désastre. Mais sans vouloir aborder la question des responsabilités, on aboutit aujourd'hui à l'épuisement de comportements diplomatiques et internationaux qui n'ont été que exclusion, critique, mise à l'index. On ne peut pas dire, aucun pays n'a le droit de dire à un autre pays, votre président n'est pas le bon, vous devez le changer. Les pays doivent gérer eux-mêmes leurs affaires, ils doivent être respectés, et je pense que beaucoup de choses qui se passent actuellement et dont nous souffrons, qui ont entraîné des douleurs, sont le résultat d'un déchaînement de militantisme souvent dogmatique de la part de beaucoup de pays. Alors, je ne vais pas vous en dire plus sur ma déception. Ça fait 35 ans que j'œuvre dans les milieux politiques et diplomatiques, et mesdames et messieurs, ça fait 35 ans que je suis déçu. Je suis déçu par ce que représente la nature humaine. Je suis déçu par l'affaissement global du niveau du leadership international. On dirait que les grands hommes et les grandes femmes n'existent plus. On voit émerger aujourd'hui des leaders qui véritablement ne sont pas adaptés à la responsabilité qu'ils doivent porter. Alors il faut trouver une réponse à tout ça, on ne va pas simplement se lamenter. Et je pense que cette réponse, il est des hommes, il est des femmes qui peuvent l'induire. Et c'était un peu le sens de ce que je vous disais, madame, tout à l'heure. Nous avons un rôle à jouer et nous devons le jouer d'une manière efficace, d'une manière professionnelle, d'une manière engagée, parce que notre monde n'est pas l'objet d'une malédiction. Il n'est pas acceptable aujourd'hui au XXIe siècle de constater ce que nous voyons. Nous devons changer cela. Et pour changer cela, il faut véritablement beaucoup d'amour, beaucoup de considération pour l'autre, beaucoup de réalisme, et puis surtout, ce qui fait souvent défaut, sauf ici, une vision. Et la vision que j'ai entendue hier, madame, c'est une vision qui m'a beaucoup plu. Merci beaucoup.
I now have the honor of introducing, as you can see, all my papers just on the floor, so that we get our next speaker, the President of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Mr. Peter Maada.
Madam Erdogan, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, excellencies. The call of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum to recode diplomacy and to focus on soft power is urgently needed. Hard power expressed through military operations in the international arena has a huge cost for people, states, and the international system. We meet today against the backdrop of the suffering and despair of the civilians in Ukraine. The situation is desperate, more desperate by the hour, but sadly the misery in Ukraine is only one part. If we get the full picture, we have to think about Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Yemen, Syria, the Sahel, the Lake Chad, and many other places in the world. The bottom line is, when diplomacy and soft power fail, and when hostilities between states dominate, it is civilians who suffer. In such a world, what can be done to influence parties to conflicts and those who support them to end the suffering? Today, I would like to bring you 6 brief recommendations of what, in our perspective, can be done. Firstly, we need to ensure better respect for international humanitarian law that provides a pathway out of the endless cycles of hostilities and suffering. International humanitarian law has been designed by states and amongst belligerents to maintain humanity even in the worst situation of war and to contain the negative impact of conflicts on individuals, societies, and states. The ICRC sees that even in the most deadly and polarizing conflict, it is important to have minimal agreements on evacuating civilians, on reconnecting families, on dignified treatment of prisoners, and the respectful exchange of human remains. International humanitarian law is a powerful instrument to ensure pathways for reconciliation after the conflict. Secondly, international law is a living body designated to provide guidance on the gritty realities of war. It can only play its role if it is accompanied by efforts to change behavior. And in order to change behavior, we need to engage with parties to conflict, with all parties to conflict. ICRC, for instance, at the present moment, is in dialogue with more than 130 states and more than 460 non-state armed groups around the world in more than 50 contexts in which we operate. We do that in order to change behavior and to make this behavior more in sync with the law. We are adapting our diplomatic strategies because today nobody fights war alone. And because nobody fights war alone, we need to influence those who influence parties to conflict. And we need to use soft power in order to change behavior. We have designed the whole agenda from the treatment of prisoners humanely to mortal remains. I have mentioned the issues in order to ensure that influence is exerted on parties to conflict so that behavior changes. My third recommendation is that soft diplomacy need networks of influencers. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies first and foremost, and heads of ladies and spouses of heads of states, I wanted really to thank you for all the support that you offer through your network to the work of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, to the work of positive soft power policy in the areas in which we operate. We rely on those networks because without those networks of power, we cannot connect what happens on the ground to what happens in the area of diplomacy and policy. Fourthly, ICRC experiences on changing behavior through respect of the law has sharpened our awareness that it is critically important to shape consensus and trust building as a core instrument of soft power. The law applicable to all belligerents, and so ICRC speaks with all those who can influence and promote norms, helping to provide respect for the law so that trustful relations can eventually unfold. While states and non-state armed groups are our key interlocutor, increasingly also we talk to broader cycles of influential stakeholders, private military and security companies involved in war, religious influencers, civil society organizations, the academia. Over a decade, for instance, we have developed a platform of dialogue between international humanitarian law and Islamic circles because we wanted to create understanding on the reading of the basics of law in different cultural horizons. Fifthly, soft power must start where hard power has caused the greatest destruction, in communities affected by war. As the Red Cross and the Red Crescent movement, we work in close proximity to communities, listening to their needs, their expectations, their hopes and fears, and we try to design the most relevant responses. We support people's agencies as experts of their own situations with skills, capacities, and enormous resilience. Even more importantly, in a world with diminishing trust, governments and institutions, we must recognize that soft power is community power. And finally, humanitarian soft power needs to leverage technology and innovation. Today, technology and innovation are perfecting war. We need to ensure that they are perfecting the response on the impact of war. This means, for example, ensuring that telemedicine services are available in bigger scale, that digital payments are used in order to reach more, that artificial intelligence is here to match the identities in search for missing people, that virtual reality tools, for instance, are used for training belligerents and to ensure better behavior. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement with ICRC's specific mandate on conflict and violence finds itself at a crossroad of soft and hard power. The movement of the Red Cross and Red Crescent was designed to counter the problems of hard power through the tools of soft power, humanitarian diplomacy and humanitarian action. In this sense, the movement is the pragmatic representation of soft power even before the term was invented in today's world. Today, we continue to explore alliances and partnerships with all those who agree that wars have limits and that there is a world beyond hard power to be still created. I thank you.
Thank you so much. to hear from your organization right now. Your work is truly crucial at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, now please join me in welcoming Dr. Bineta Diop. She is the Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security for the African Union.
Yes, careful. Your Excellency, Madam Erdogan, and all First Lady present, ladies and gentlemen, good morning all. Let me start by expressing my gratitude to Her Excellency, Madam Erdogan, the First Lady of Turkey, for inviting me to this important panel, strengthening solidarity and promoting peace through soft power. I think this is a timely topic, but also because we are facing today, conflict that emanates from some interests, sometimes individual interests that undermine humanity and communality. Through Madam First Lady, I want to congratulate you for your persistent efforts in promoting diplomacy by organizing such high-level events during the Antalya Diplomacy Forum to discuss matters core to our current world situation in this world. I also want to recognize the partnership you have built with the African continent through your various trips, mission to the continent, and your appreciation to our tradition, our culture, our art. Thank you today for spotlighting African women artisanal work collection in Turkey. You are our ambassador here in Turkey. Before I proceed, allow me to bring the warm greetings and congratulations of the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mr. Fatima, to President Erdogan for the Antalya Forum, through you, Madam First Lady. Indeed, the African history, we have in the past, but still present, solidarity, the living together, the social cohesion, which are our strong values in this society. President Nelson Mandela defined the philosophy, that philosophy of Ubuntu, which in simple terms means a person is a person through other person. I am human because you are. I participate and I share. We have common destiny. Nobody is safe until everybody is safe. And if Africa is not safe, the world will not be safe. It's in this culture of Ubuntu that we draw some principle, prerequisites for the solid peace in the world. It's the respect for human beings, the rights of the women we have seen in the film, the refugee, the displaced. We need to restore their dignity. And that's the dignity of all, not just the African, but the dignity of everybody. And I think the absence of this fundamental principle that bring most of this conflict, what Peter Murray have said that, these men with the muscles and the guns cannot solve the problems. We need to bring and change the attitude and bring another way and shift the mindset that there is another way of doing it. So in this rich African culture, where principles of communalism and human relations are upheld, women continue to be the backbone of the society. And I am sure that the women draw for their own experience and know-how and soft power from motherhood, wifehood, sisterhood, and they bring that those key role they play in society to prevent, to mediate, and resolve conflict. I'm very happy to see here the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Rwanda. I have admired my sister of Rwanda, who have been the one to be the backbone of the society and who have brought Rwanda where it is right now. Let me give you an example, not just Rwanda in recent time. You know, one keyword I appreciate is the issue of solidarity. I have myself undertaken many solidarity missions in conflict zones to meet our sisters and give hope, the issue of hope, that you can survive and the justice will prevail. As a special envoy of the African Union have visited Chad, the Lake Chad Basin, and during the COVID even, we did what Peter has said, leverage on new technology. We have done interact with women in Cabo Delgado, those displaced women, and to bring that solidarity, our voice, their voice, together with Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and Rasa Machel to say this is what we need to make sure that we women of Africa, we are in solidarity with our sisters, and I think that needs to be continued to be done at that level. They need hope, and the issue of hope is important. The other issue that I wanted to bring out is the sisterhood. You know, I have witnessed women from the Manu River, and I'm happy to see here the women of Liberia, Sierra Leone, First Lady of Sierra Leone, and Guinea, who have built the bridges and utilizing the concept of sisterhood, drawing from your common culture and boundaries in that region to bring the soft power to mediate, and now we can see that in that region, you have peace, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. What you need more is to make sure that those peace are sustained. So I think this is how women use a soft diplomacy from one country to another. Today, we know that in Liberia, thanks to people like Lima Boy, the Nobel Peace Laureate, but also Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the former president, they bring Liberia into reconciliation, healing, and unity in that war-torn society. And this is what we call that soft power that women can bring, that we have seen, what is happening in many countries, including your involvement in Africa, but the whole world, by today bringing our sister, the former First Lady of Haiti. Haiti is part of all of us, is part of humanity. By sitting next to you, and we have witnessed the killing of her husband, and the fact that this woman, almost passed away with her children, but she's alive. And you are bringing her because you are in solidarity with Haiti, solidarity with the former First Lady of Haiti. These few examples are ample evidence that women have used their quiet diplomacy to bring peace in their community, yet their contribution are not used at the highest level. We can see it in track 3, we see it in track 2, we want it in track 1. And that's what this today, I think, you are bringing it at this diplomacy forum. So respect of elders, Madam First Lady, the African Union that I represent here today, have instituted the panel of the wise, because we need to use the wise men and women, a critical pillar of our peace and security architecture of the AU, who is highly respected African personality from various segments of society to serve to support the efforts of the Union in conflict prevention, because what we need is not wait until it's too late. We see signals. What we need is to make sure that we prevent, and women can play that critical role. As I conclude, Madam First Lady, the challenge is to use that we have the soft power in the absence of instituting the required governance environment that we need. Let's do it. Let's use the value of women responsibility, accountability, tolerance, diplomacy, empathy, caring, accommodating everybody, and truth-telling, important, forgiveness in the decision making. This is what we need, and not just the gun. So I made the one appeal only to the international community and to everybody to upscale efforts that African women and African and women in the global world mainstream into politics, including, at international level, at regional level. Today, Madam First Lady, is the beginning of recognizing in this high level sphere the value of soft power of women in diplomacy as a tool to conflict prevention and peace building. Thank you for your kind attention.
And you are right. Ubuntu, better incorporated in our global dynamics today, could move us all immeasurably toward peace. We can only hope that your message is heard worldwide. Now, I have the honor of introducing our next speaker, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Mr. Filippo Grandi. Please join me. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here, Madam Erdogan, Madam First Lady, and distinguished guests. I am also very honored to be participating in this Antalya conference, which has been, if I may say, an opportunity to show, I was going to say showcase, but show is better, to show that soft power still has some place in today's world. What we have seen, at least an effort to bring the parties of the terrible conflict in Ukraine together and talk, is the ultimate example of soft power, and I would like to pay tribute to Turkey and to its leadership for having wanted to prove that this is still possible. Thank you for that. I will just, a lot has been said already, so I won't speak for too long. And, my colleague and friend Peter Maurer and I are often in conferences together, so the one who speaks first says it all, the other one has to complement. So that's exactly what I will be doing now, with a few thoughts from my perspective. And first of all, I was thinking, listening to the other speakers, why am I here as the head of a humanitarian organization, of a refugee, the UN Refugee Organization? Well, because somehow we, the humanitarians, are dealing with the consequences of the mistakes of hard power. That's what we do. As Peter and I often say, we pick up the pieces that are left by the damage caused by hard power. Humanitarian action, as Peter already said, and it was already mentioned by others, humanitarian action is in itself a tool of soft power, which through solidarity, to quote the title of this symposium, helps move towards peace. Somehow we, the humanitarians, are experts in soft power. And addressing and solving humanitarian issues per se do not necessarily bring to peace, but is part of the peacemaking effort. Sometimes the only part left of peacemaking efforts, and when the situation is more positive, the beginning of efforts to make peace. In my particular field, of course, the field of refugees, of people that flee because of war, of persecution, of discrimination, and I'm very conscious once again that I'm talking here in the country that hosts the largest number of refugees of any countries in the world. Turkey has more than 4 million. In my particular field, solidarity, which is mentioned here, is a key instrument of work, a key instrument of soft power. I quoted yesterday in another panel, and I often quote the preamble to the 1951 Refugee Convention, which is the foundational document of refugee law and refugee rights. The preamble says that refugees are people that have lost the protection of their state and are in need of international protection, which means they are the responsibility of the whole international community and not just of the country that receives them. So responsibility sharing is, which is another name for solidarity, is the foundation of all work in refugee crisis. And 70 years after the Refugee Convention was written by very visionary people, as was the case in many of the human rights instruments of those years, 70 years later, this is very true. And it is very clear that only through solidarity, or should we call it more technically, international cooperation, we can solve the big challenges that are before us. Not just refugees, human mobility, migration, but also the climate challenges. Also the health challenges, like we've just come out, or hopefully we're coming out of the pandemic. And of course, challenges related to peace and security. Yet, 70 years later, the response to all these challenges remains very fragmented and polarized in all areas. Climate, refugees and migration, even health. We have seen the inequalities on which the response has been founded, and of course security. And perhaps what we are observing on our screens, on internet in the last couple of weeks is the culmination of this incredible polarization that we live, the opposite of international cooperation. Now, of course, today, and especially from the point of view of my organization of humanitarians, we must focus on the immediate consequences of the tragedy of Ukraine. 2.5 million refugees in less than 2 weeks, 2 million people displaced inside the country, and probably this is a very conservative figure, 12 million people at least, as we speak, in need of humanitarian assistance. This is a tragedy of enormous proportion, which of course should not make us forget, as everybody else has mentioned, that at the same time other crises continue and should not be marginalized, including many refugee crises, humanitarian crises in Ethiopia, in Afghanistan, in the Sahel region of Africa, in Central America, and many other places. I have just come back, Madam Erdogan, from a visit to some of the countries bordering Ukraine. I was in Romania, in Moldova, and in Poland until a couple of days ago. And I have to tell you, the images that you see of this refugee crisis, which is just the tip of the iceberg of the big crisis inside Ukraine, of course, the images that you see are heartbreaking. Not just the mass of people, but the separation of women from the men. Most of the refugees, if not almost all, are women and children and elderly people, and the men are left behind to fight. This separation, the pain, the loss of a population that has been uprooted from everything in the space of a few hours, almost without notice. The pain is immense, and it mirrors the pain that we see in many other parts of the world, where we see people suffering. But what I have also seen, and this will be my last few remarks, a bit to leave us with some sense of optimism. What I have also seen is incredible solidarity. This is the theme of this meeting, and I think it's an important one. In Poland, a country that has received 1.5 million people in a few days, I have seen people from citizens from all over the country and even from abroad come and bring food and bring toys for the children, bring blankets for the people who are cold. These are simple gestures. They will not solve the problem. But somehow they tell us that solidarity has not died. And it is something upon which we must build when we construct the more elaborate responses that we have to carry out to solve these problems. And this is what I think is interesting, is that this solidarity does not come only from governments or cities. It comes from ordinary people. My organization was tasked by the General Assembly of the United Nations a couple of years ago to establish a global compact on refugees. I say this because Turkey has been one of the champions of preparing and establishing this important, I call it, toolbox for countries to respond to refugee crisis. Well, one of the foundations of the Global Compact on Refugees is precisely what we call a whole of society approach, not just states responding, but societies responding. Many of you spoke about the importance of women in leading those responses, in leading soft power. The Global Compact says all that, and somehow institutionalizes all that. And we are disheartened on the one hand by seeing the fragmentation. On the other hand, when we look at the solidarity now that is prevailing in Poland, and believe me, Madam Erdogan, I've seen it in other places. I've seen it in Bangladesh when Rohingya refugees were coming from Myanmar. I see it all the time in Africa, solidarity from village to village. That solidarity is strong, and states should not ignore it, because this is the foundation of the response. And so I would just like to conclude with that perhaps it is in this solidarity, in this compassion, in this cooperation that lie the seeds of a change in course. A change in course which could lead back to diplomacy, as you have tried to do, as your country has tried to do here in Antalya, which leads back to peace. We count on your leadership, on the leadership of other eminent people in this symposium to show us the way. Thank you.
Randy, thank you so much. And thank you so much also for describing those scenes of humanity, those images you've been seeing on Ukraine's border, because the sense of optimism is really what we need most right now. So thank you for that. I now have the honor of introducing a very special speaker now. As was mentioned before, the former First Lady of Haiti, Mrs. Martine Moïse, is here. Thank you so much.
Madame la Première Dame de la République de Turquie, tout protocole est observé, parce que je voulais remercier la Première Dame de la République de Turquie, que je considère maintenant comme une sœur, parce qu'à un moment difficile, j'ai reçu un appel qui m'a beaucoup réconforté. Et je peux répéter ce qu'elle m'a dit. Madame Moïse, si là où vous êtes, vous ne sentez pas bien, vous avez une maison en Turquie, venez chez vous. Et aujourd'hui, je vous remercie. Je remercie également Monsieur le Président Erdogan de m'avoir invité à cette conférence de haut niveau sur le rôle des acteurs du soft power en situation de conflit. Je salue aussi l'hospitalité des autorités et du peuple turc. C'est une occasion pour moi de faire le plaidoyer pour la résolution pacifique des différends à travers le monde. Ce thème autour duquel se déroule ce grand forum s'inscrit dans l'objectif perpétuel de paix que poursuivent les nations et les peuples du monde. Le soft power est une méthode efficace de maintenir la paix dans le monde en priorisant un ensemble de moyens non contraignants pour atteindre de grands objectifs internationaux. C'est avant tout une politique d'influence, une capacité d'influencer indirectement l'autre, de séduire, de persuader sans avoir à utiliser ni force ni menace. Cette influence peut être économique, culturelle, idéologique. Cette force de persuasion va jouer sur le comportement de l'autre acteur, dont les intérêts peuvent être modifiés sans la manière forte. De grandes campagnes de sensibilisation sont lancées pour que la culture soit l'un des piliers de la puissance de la persuasion à travers le cinéma, la musique, le théâtre. Le chant des Nations Unies, tout en consacrant l'égalité souveraine des États, insiste sur l'obligation de ne pas recourir à la force dans les relations. Cette disposition acceptée par quasi tous les États et territoires du monde est une proclamation de foi en faveur de la paix et par voie de conséquence au profit du droit à la vie. La mise en avant de ce prescrit de la Charte est une manière de renforcer dans sa légitimité ce concept assez nouveau promu par l'Américain Joseph Nye, analyste des relations internationales depuis la fin de la guerre froide vers 1990. À travers le monde, le soft power est supposé être le point axial de la dynamique géopolitique. Au sein d'une tension bilatérale, l'un et l'autre des pays doivent utiliser la voie diplomatique et dès lors avoir recours au soft power et ainsi prioriser la démocratie sur l'autocratie. Dans ce cadre, il est conventionnellement fait obligation aux États de prioriser les méthodes alternatives de dissuasion allant dans le sens de la conservation de la paix. L'usage efficace du soft power témoigne dans son action internationale avec diplomatie avec entraide entre les puissances. Cela participe aussi à légitimer l'hégémonie de ces idées, de ces représentations des grands enjeux mondiaux qui sont liés à des sujets d'importance tels que l'environnement, le droit de l'homme, le nucléaire, les crimes transnationaux, la corruption, le commerce international et autres. Cette méthode trouve son émergence et son efficience dans, entre autres, les alliances, l'accès équitable à une éducation de qualité dans le monde, la grande utilisation de la langue nationale du pays, l'assistance économique apportée aux États, l'activité de la culture. Ces avantages mis à profit comme arme de dissuasion contribuent fortement à influencer les relations internationales. De notre lieu, nous croyons également que le régime politique de l'État peut aussi avoir un effet positif dans la mise en œuvre de cette stratégie, qui est aussi considérée comme un pouvoir de négociation concluant. Pour Haïti, notre soft and hard power a toujours été ancré dans la démocratie et la liberté. C'est notre étoile polaire, et ce depuis la création de notre État en 1804. En tant que première république du monde, nous soutenons toutes les luttes démocratiques et la liberté de tous les peuples. Nous avons combattu aux côtés des républiques, aux côtés des bolivariens en Amérique latine, en Équateur, en Bolivie, en Colombie, au Pérou, au Venezuela, au Panama, etc. Nous avons également combattu aux côtés des révolutionnaires en Amérique à 2 reprises, à Savannah en Géorgie pour leur indépendance et à la bataille de Chalmette pour protéger leur indépendance. Nous ne croyons pas en l'oppression des peuples. Nous pensons fermement que tout peuple doit jouir de sa liberté et de ne pas subir l'autocratie de l'autre. Aujourd'hui, nous défendons la paix. En ces temps tragiques, marqués par la guerre, il est important de poursuivre des campagnes sur le soft power. Ces derniers jours, la Turquie nous montre l'exemple du soft power. En multipliant de nombreux efforts de médiation, la Turquie arrive à jouer un rôle de facilitateur capable d'engager des pourparlers directs entre les deux pays, la Russie et l'Ukraine, en vue de trouver une issue à cette crise diplomatique et politique. J'ai été témoin direct de la puissance du soft power, engagé pour soutenir l'humanité de la meilleure façon que possible en temps de tragédie. En effet, à la suite du tremblement de terre de magnitude 7 qui a secoué Haïti en 2010, entraînant la perte de 320 000 de nos compatriotes, nous avons vu le bon côté du soft power, la fidélité étrangère et les actes d'altruisme des bénévoles et des ONG pour aider et sauver et soigner et nourrir les blessés. En cette époque, j'encourage toutes les nations à réfléchir non seulement à la manière de gérer leur stratégie de hard power, mais aussi à la manière de tirer parti de leur soft power de manière responsable dans l'intérêt de l'humanité. La démocratie et l'état de droit, qui sont nécessairement liés au respect des droits fondamentaux, favorisent une telle approche, en ce sens qu'ils établissent au préalable des règles acceptées par la majorité qui régissent le fonctionnement des acteurs et le comportement, tant sur la scène nationale qu'internationale, des autorités étatiques. La démocratie, l'état de droit et les droits de l'homme sont des valeurs universellement acceptées qui renforcent l'image et l'opinion internationale de l'État. Ces deux éléments sont prépondérants dans la bonne utilisation du soft power. Je dois aussi ajouter qu'un État qui combat la criminalité, qui défend et garantit les valeurs de justice, qui lutte contre l'impunité et qui ne tolère pas que son territoire devienne un lieu de refuge pour les suspects d'assassinats perpétrés dans d'autres pays, se positionne aussi un acteur majeur de la mise en œuvre du soft power. C'est à cette phase que je veux saluer la décision de justice, de la justice turque, de maintenir en détention l'un des suspects de l'assassinat nomade, le feu président Jovenel Moïse, le défenseur des oubliés de la République, qui a été martyrisé parce qu'il voulait défendre les valeurs démocratiques et libérer son pays de la gangrène de la corruption. Le thème que nous traitons aujourd'hui, renforcer la solidarité et faire la promotion de la paix à travers la persuasion, va en contresens avec l'usage de la violence, de la force et de tous les moyens répressifs dont le seul but est de parvenir à la déstabilisation de toute une nation à des fins politiques. Le soft power est une excellente méthode qui, bien utilisée, peut faire germer la démocratie, la promotion de la paix sociale et politique, le respect du droit à la vie. En ces temps difficiles et en temps de guerre, il est plus qu'important d'utiliser le levier du soft power, car il faut ne jamais sous-estimer l'arme de la dialectique. J'encourage alors les nations à ne pas prioriser le hard power, mais surtout à prioriser leur responsabilité de soft power, ceci pour le bien de l'humanité tout entière, afin que dans le cœur de chaque âme puisse germer une veine d'espoir, d'amour pour un monde meilleur. Merci de m'avoir prêté attention.
Thank you so much for that. And finally, it is my sincere honor to welcome to the podium to deliver our concluding speech today, the First Lady of Turkey, Mrs. Emine Erdogan.
Değerli hanımefendiler, beyefendiler, kıymetli katılımcılar, sizleri sevgiyle, saygıyla selamlıyor. Ülkemizde ağırlamaktan büyük bir mutluluk duyuyorum. Antalya Diplomacy Forum'un ikincisinde sizlerle bir araya gelmek gerçekten çok güzel. Antalya, zengin doğası ve tarihiyle dünyanın sayılı cazibe merkezlerinden biri. Ancak bu foruma ev sahibi olarak seçmemizin başka bir nedeni daha var. Burası milattan önce 13. yüzyıla uzanan geçmişinde demokrasi ve diyaloğun doğum merkezlerinden biriydi. Bugün barış hakkındaki istişareleri maalesef Ukrayna'daki sıcak çatışmaların doğurduğu yıkım ve acıların üzüntüsü içinde gerçekleştiriyoruz. Evlatlarını çatışmalarda kaybeden annelerin yakarışları dünyanın her tarafında yankılanıyor. Ailelerin parçalandığına şahit oluyoruz. Sevdiklerini geride bırakarak vatanını terk etmek zorunda kalan insanların kederli bakışları maalesef içimizi dağılıyor. Savaşın karanlık gölgesi ne yazık ki bir kez daha insanlığın üzerine çöktü. İşte tam da bu zor günlerde barış umudunu canlı tutmak ve barışa yönelik gayretimizi artırarak el ele vermek zorundayız. Böyle bir iklimde yumuşak gücün paha biçilmez değerinin daha da belirgin olduğu noktasında hemfikir olduğumuza inanıyorum. Çünkü yumuşak güç kaba kuvvetle değil, hak ve meşruiyet zemininde buluşmaktır. Hayalini kurduğumuz dünyaya başkalarını da ortak etmektir. Dolayısıyla yumuşak gücün özü sahip olduklarımızı arttırmak değil, zenginliklerimizi paylaşmaktır. O yüzden farklılıkların altını çizmektense ortak noktalarımızı güçlendirmenin üzerinde durmalıyız. Kültür, sanat ve spor gibi birleştirici alanların farkında olmalı, diplomasiyi yeniden kurgularken bu potansiyelden azami ölçüde faydalanmalıyız. Değerli misafirler, Türkiye olarak savaşın felaketlerinden kaçan 4 milyondan fazla insana kucak açtı. Kültürümüzün hoşgörüsü ve misafirperverliği onların sığınabilecekleri güvenli bir liman oldu. Sınırlarımızın ötesinde Suriye'den Arakan'a kadar nerede bir mağdur varsa yanlarında olduk. Sadece komşu ülkelerde değil, Afrika'dan Latin Amerika'ya kadar geniş bir coğrafyada her sorunun barışçıl yollarla çözümü için katkı sağlıyoruz. Sağladığımız insani yardımlarla refah ve kalkınmanın sadece gelişmiş ülkelerde değil, her yerde kök salmasını amaçlıyoruz. Bu, kalıcı barışa giden ana yollardan biridir. Türkiye yalnızca bugün değil, uzun tarihinde dün de savaş, zulüm ve açlık gibi nice felaketten kaçan insanların sığınağı, evi, memleketi oldu. Hoşgörü kültürünün Anadolu topraklarında çok derinlere uzanan kökleri var. Ve biz bu deneyimi her daim paylaşıp çoğaltmaya hazırız. Çünkü bugün hala 2 milyar insan çatışma bölgelerinde yaşıyor. 84 milyon insan şiddet ve çatışmalar nedeniyle yurtlarından ediliyor. Din ve ırk gibi nedenlerle ayrımcılığın tırmandığını görüyoruz maalesef. İnsanlar ön yargı cephelerine taburlar halinde sevk ediliyor. Sevgi, merhamet ve barış algı operasyonlarına kurban ediliyor. Ukrayna'da hepimizi büyük bir kedere sürükleyen savaş karşısında gösterilen refleks maalesef diğer masum halklar için eşit gösterilmedi. Hangi ırktan, hangi inançtan olursa olsun bir çocuğun, bir kadının savaşın karşısında çektiği acı, yaşadığı korku hepsi eşittir. Bir gözyaşının diğerine üstünlüğü olabilir mi? O yüzden bugünü bir milat olarak alıp hali hazırdaki tüm savaşlar karşısında birlik olalım. Çatışmaların ne yazık ki artan sayılarla sivilleri hedef aldığı bir dünyada gözlerimizi kapatıp pembe rüyalar göreceğimiz uykular uyuyamayız. İnsanlık dün ve bugün olduğu gibi her daim türlü imtihanlarla sınanacak. Bu sınavları insanlıktan tam not alarak geçmek için moral değerlerin kadim kitapların sayfasında sıkışıp kalmasına izin vermemeliyiz. Kısacası diplomasiyi yeniden kurgularken diyaloğun, insan sevgisinin ve evrensel değerlerin hakim olduğu yeni bir sayfa açıyoruz. Kıymetli misafirler, savaşlar sivil altyapıya olduğu kadar kültürel hazinelerimize ve tabiata da büyük bir zarar veriyor. Savaşlar yüzünden birçok insanlık mirası yeryüzünden silindi. Tarihsel belleğimiz onarılması güç şekilde zarar görür. geleceğe aktarabilecek nice eseri artık sadece fotoğraf karelerinde görebiliyoruz. Bunun yanında savaşların getirdiği kayıplardan bahsederken tabiat başlığını sıklıkla ıskalıyoruz. İklim değişikliğinde insanlık için kırmızı alarm verilmiş bir dönemdeyiz. Gelecek, doğanın kurtarılmasına bu kadar bağlıyken savaşlar ekosistemimizi ve yaşam kaynaklarımızı geri dönüşsüz bir şekilde tahrip ediyor. Savaşlardan geriye verimsiz topraklar, yok olan ormanlar, kirlenmiş su kaynakları ve azalan biyoçeşitlilik kalıyor. Hayvanlar da en az insanlar kadar yuvasız kalıyor, yerlerinden ediliyor, ölüyor ya da sakatlanıyorlar. Şöyle bir dönüp geriye baksak, yakın zamandaki savaş ve çatışmaların doğa üzerindeki tahribatı üzerinde düşünmek bile bir uyanışın vesilesi olabilir. Mesela hatırlarsanız 1991 Körfez Savaşı'nda koylar petrolle tıkanmıştı. 953 kilometre karelik bir alan üzerinde duman ve sis oluşmuştu. 1500 kilometrelik Körfez kıyısında toprak petrolü emmişti. 15.000 kilometre karelik Mezopotamya sulak alanı yok oldu. Denize akıtılan 11 milyon varil petrol Basra Körfezi'ni ölü deniz haline getirdi. 100.000'den fazla perdeli ayaklı ve gözülen kuşun beslenme alanları zarar gördü. Demokratik Kongo Cumhuriyeti'nde 3 yıllık sivil savaşta binlerce fil ve nesli tükenen goriller de öldürüldü. 1999 Kosova Savaşı'nda 50'den fazla sanayi sitesi bombalandı. 80.000 ton petrol çevreye salındı, komşu ülkelere siyah yağmur yağdı. 1994-95 yıllarında Bosna Hersek'te kullanılan bazı silahlar içme sularını zehirledi. Tuna Nehri'ne 100 tondan fazla amonyum petrol ürünleri ve ağır metaller karıştı. Maalesef benzer örnekler listesi önümüzde uzayıp gidiyor. Dünyaya bunu yapmaya kimsenin hakkı yok. Tüm inançların insanın tabiatla nasıl ilişki kurması gerektiğine dair kuralları vardır. Mesela İslam dininde tabiatla ilişki aşırılıktan uzak, ölçülü ve dengeli olmak zorundadır. Peygamberimiz bir hadisinde ağaçlara sopa ile vurulamaz ve bunlar kesilemez. Fakat zaruret halinde hayvanların yemesi için hafif ve yumuşak bir şekilde rıfk ile sallanarak yaprakları silkelenebilir buyurduğunu biliyoruz. Dinimiz ağaca vurmayı bile yasaklarken yeryüzüne inen bombalar asla kabul edilemez. Kur'an'da bir ayette göğü Allah yükseltti ve mizanı o koydu. Sakın dengeyi bozmayın ister. Bunun gibi birçok ayet ve hadis-i şerif insanın doğayla olan ilişkisini kurallara bağlar, ölçülü ve merhametli olmayı emreder. Her din ve her öğreti iyiliği, güzelliği emreder. Değerli konuklar, malumunuz kadınlar ve çocuklar savaşlardan orantısız bir şekilde etkileniyorlar. Birleşmiş Milletler Güvenlik Konseyi'nin 1325 sayılı kararının kabulünün üzerinden 22 yıl geçti. Bu karar, kadınların barış ve arabuluculuk sürecinde süreçlerine dahil edilmesinin önemini ortaya koyuyor. Nitekim araştırmalar 1992-2009 yılları arasında müzakerecilerin yalnızca %13'ünün, ara bulucuların %6'sının kadınlardan oluştuğunu gösteriyor. Halbuki kadınların ara bulucu süreçlerinde farklı gruplarla çalışmaya ve işbirliğine daha yatkın olduğu biliniyor. Kadınlar barış süreçlerinde sosyal meselelere daha fazla odaklanarak başarı şansını arttırıyor. O nedenle çatışma çözümü ve arabulucu süreçlerinin daha kapsayıcı olması hususunda dikkatinizi çekmek istiyorum. Kadınların ve gençlerin seslerinin gür çıkması çok önemli. Türkiye olarak bu konuya büyük bir önem atfediyoruz. Yine Antalya'da düzenlenen 8. İstanbul Arabuluculuk Konferansı'nın bir paneli tamamen kadınların ve gençlerin arabuluculuk süreçlerindeki önemini anlatmaya çalışmıştır. İster mikro, ister makro düzeyde olsun, kadınların tüm karar mekanizmalarındaki varlığının artırılmasının hayati önemine yürekten inanıyorum. Kadın sağduyusunun ve müzakere yeteneğinin sorunların çözümüne ivme kazandıracağını biliyorum. Sözlerime son vermeden, yüzyıllar öncesinden insanlığa seslenen Anadolu'nun büyük tasavvuf şairi Yunus Emre'nin sözlerini hatırlatmak istiyorum. Sade bir ifadeyle, engin bir derinliği işaret eden çağrısında, gelin tanış olalım, işi kolay kılalım demişti. İnsanların arasındaki ön yargı duvarlarını kırmak ve sevginin akışına imkan vermek ancak yakınlaşmakla, diyalogla ve hoşgörüyle mümkündür. Yeter ki bu gayrette olalım. Programa katılan tüm misafirlere şükranlarımı sunuyorum. Panelin hayırlara vesile olmasını diliyor. Tüm konuşmacılara ayrı ayrı teşekkür ediyorum. Dünyanın daimi iyiliği için çok çalışacağımız ve savaşların insanlığı daha fazla yaralamadığı günler diliyorum. Hepinizi saygıyla selamlıyorum.
We'd like to invite all of our distinguished speakers to please come up to the stage again so we can take what we like to call a family photo. Thank you so much. And thanks to the rest of our audience really for joining us today. What a fascinating presentation, and thank you for being here with us to share it. Microphone is on. Yes, we'd now like to invite the First Ladies of Sierra Leone, Niger, and the Northern Republic of Cyprus to come up to the stage, as well as the spouse of the Turkish Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mrs. Hulya Çavuşoğlu. Please do come to the stage, and as well as the former First Ladies of Haiti and Jordan. Please do come to the stage so we can take this one. Thank you so much.
Telefon kaldıranlar indirebilir miyiz? Daha kolay olur. Telefonu kaldıranlar.